stressful things in the probate process, and people often don't think about this, is after someone dies, having to divide up their personal property. Now, when I'm talking about personal property, what I'm talking about is belongings that don't have titles attached to them. And that may be, like your household goods, your furniture, your pots and pans, your jewelry, your car, anything like that, other than like real estate or, with a house on it or something. But all that stuff that can be moved around, that's your personal property. It can include just about everything. Some things that people forget about are like sporting goods, jewelry, in particular, pictures. All right. Sometimes things with more sentimental value, like Christmas ornaments, believe it or not, but it includes everything there. The problem with this kind of stuff is that there are emotional ties to it. So if you always, bake cookies with one of the kids, they may remember, mixing bowls. They may remember, particular spatulas or baking pans. There may be pictures that you had in the house that they were always drawn to. That had, just has a meaning for them. That's where the stress comes in. People have that attachment to that item. We may or may not know about having that attachment to that item. And so what happens is after you pass away, people are polite, generally speaking, and they don't say, gee, I'd really like that. And it may not have any big value to it. It could be something very small, but they associate that with you, and they want to keep that as a memento. So that's where the stress comes into things, particularly if two or more people want the same item. Okay. There was a recent estate that I had where all three grandchildren wanted one set of bedroom furniture. It was from their grandmother's estate. It wasn't the nicest set or anything, nothing fancy, and the bedding had all seen better days and everything like that. But the grandkids remembered that when they went to visit grandma, this is where they slept. And, it was an emotional issue for them. It wasn't just a set of furniture that, gee, that'd be nice to have for a guest room or something. They remembered, the emotions that were tied to it. It took a little bit of discussion, but one ended up taking furniture, but they also agreed to give the set when they died to one of the other grandchildren's child. Okay, so it stayed in the family. They knew where it was going, and people kind of settled on where it was and how it was going to be used. This is also, interestingly, what motivates a lot of people to collect things from their childhood. There was a game my mother-in-law has. It's called Pig in the Garden. I don't know if anybody else remembers this game, but my kids definitely remember this game. They remember playing with it and really enjoying it. My mother-in-law's set happens to be in pretty good shape still. And I thought, gee, it'd be nice to get a set for, my kids. So I went, where else do you buy old games? eBay. And those silly sets are selling for $300 a set. So people really, from their childhood, these are the things that they attach to. There are also some issues that you may not have considered that surround personal property. The same item, say a vase, okay, has a different meaning for each person. Somebody may want it, somebody could care less, two people may want it. But different people have different attachments to different items. It's not the value of the item, it's the sentimental value of the item. And you have to kind of plan for those sorts of situations. There is nothing wrong with asking, like the grandkids or the kids, is there anything in my house that you would like if I pass away? And, people will probably give you, different items, but kind of remember that. And you can certainly have that in your will. That way it gets distributed to the right person. The personal representative isn't sitting there having to guess which items should go to which people. And it's settled. It's a settled matter that no one is going to get upset about. Everybody wants to do this in some sort of fair way. Fair is going to depend on you and your family, okay? It doesn't have to be the dollar value of the item. It has to be the sentimental value of the item that really describes what fair is going to be for your family. Talking about your possessions, I know is very personal, and it also means facing your own death and the deaths of other family members. It may be a difficult thing to do. Some people have no problem with it. Some people, are a little bit more hesitant about it, particularly if they're younger, because oftentimes they don't want to face losing you. And so they don't want to talk about it, but it is something that really does need to be talked about. This is the item that people most fight about in an estate. I mean, they'll fight about money, of course, but what they really fight about, where it gets hurtsome to people, are these personal possessions. One other way to kind of look at this job of dividing up your personal property is to look at it as a way to continue family traditions. Not all family traditions have to go to one person, but whatever tradition it may be should go to the person that it matters most. So if you have particular religious items, there are some people who are going to want that. Somebody else may want, Christmas ornaments or Halloween decorations or whatever their favorite holiday was. That's the item that draws them. Part of what you need to do is to draw that out, before passing away, to make sure that that is addressed and taken care of. It's also, when you do this process, one other thing that I found that's really helpful is if you approach it this way, saying that, look, I want you to remember me when I passed, and I want to share the memories with you of this specific item, okay? It's a bonding process as well, and they're going to understand exactly why, they got that particular item. Unlike what I do with most estate planning or administering an estate as well, these are the emotionally difficult issues, and not one that an attorney can handle well. I'm not part of that family, and I don't have those emotional ties to it. My job at that point is simply to enforce what it is that that person has put in their will. So the issue is you should try to get that as right as you can for the people that you're leaving things to. There are some considerations you need to take when you go through this kind of planning. Transferring personal items first can be very sensitive to that person. Sometimes there are bad memories attached as well as good memories. And, you want to get an idea of what it is that person wants to remember of you. determine what you want to accomplish with making a transfer of an item. What is it that you want them to remember? I don't generally suggest it go in the will, but there's nothing wrong with leaving a small note or a letter for that person explaining why that item went to them. You have to be also the official person who decides what's fair. Okay. That's kind of tough to do sometimes because people aren't exactly forthcoming with what they want or why they want an item. But that's part of, something that you need to do to help tease that information out. You can also consider different methods of making a distribution and maybe the consequences of that. Sometimes it is better to give a gift while you are alive instead of waiting until you pass away. If you're using the item, no, it's your property, okay? You don't have to give it away before you're done using it. But if there are items, that you're not using, that someone would like, it gives you the opportunity to express to them why you're giving them the item. And I think, most of the people who receive that really appreciate that as well, that you made a thoughtful choice for them, and offered them some input if that's what you need to do. A lot of times what I end up putting in the will is something to the nature of, all my personal property, I divide equally among my 4 children. That may not be fair, okay? Some people may really not need the items, in which case they're likely to be thrown out, whereas somebody else could really use the items. Have some consideration for that as well. I think that if you kind of look at it that way, you'll do a better job of making those distributions. Planning with your estate is probably amazingly easy compared to distributing these personal property items. It's your house. Okay, we're going to sell the house and split up the money. That's easier than saying, gee, I have these different boxes of Christmas ornaments, and which child or which grandchild would really like to have them? Which wants, the topper on the tree? Which wants a certain set of ornaments? But that's what really can take time in planning out your estate. So there are different ways of dividing things, and that's where I've come up with this wonderful book, Who Gets Grandma's Yellow Pie Plate? It is put out by the University of Minnesota. You can order it directly from them. It's $12. You can also probably find it at some of the used book places online. What it is basically a series of questions for you and for who's receiving the items about what's your priority, what is it you're trying to achieve by distributing these items. All right. And answering the questions to figure out what is the important, item that you want to emphasize when you give away these items after you pass away. It might be particular items that people have a particular memory for. It could be conveying family history. That's often true when you have a lot of pictures. Also, please remember that pictures can be copied. So one original picture doesn't have to just go to one person. The personal representative can certainly make copies of those pictures and give them to whoever wants them. That would be a way of looking at it. The reason I particularly like this book is it's very thoughtful in asking the questions about why you're distributing what you're distributing. There are also online services what you do is take a picture of every item, you upload it, or actually the personal representative would upload these after you pass away. They take pictures, upload it, and everybody anonymously, because they don't, they're not going to know who else made choices, pick like their top 10 choices of items that they want in preference. It's then up to the personal representative saying, well, 4 people may want this item, but only one person wants it as their number 1 choice. And that's who it would go to. It's a little bit less partial. I mean, it's an impartial way of handling those distributions if it comes down to that. Don't be afraid of saying I. Let's see. Like I've been worried what's going to happen to everything if something happens to me. Okay. If you can hold on to that mortality, then they're less afraid to do the same for you and say, oh, okay, maybe I don't want to talk about it, but I'll think about it. And, that they have a chance to process the whole situation. Look for opportunities to talk. I generally don't recommend, saying, okay, Thanksgiving Day, I'm going to talk to you at this time. I'm going to talk to you at that time. But look for times to talk. There are lots of reasons that the recipients want to avoid the issue. 1, they don't want to lose you. But 2, a lot of people feel that bringing up death is disrespectful, and it's very, very uncomfortable for them to have that discussion. No one wants to give the idea that, oh, I'm looking forward to your dying and I get your stuff sort of situation. But it's a fact of life, all right? Some people are actually relieved that you bring up the topic, and they have some control in this discussion, all right? Another thing that is often said is, oh, that's not going to be a problem in my family. I hear that a lot. It will be a problem in the family. It's simply because there are a limited number of items that have strong family ties. And, people have to choose, and the personal representative has to choose which items go where, all right? I haven't found a family yet that is an exception to the idea that, oh, it won't be a problem in our family. It's always a problem, even if it's hidden by the members. They are often, it comes as a kind of a surprise afterwards. It's like, oh, well, somebody else wanted this, and there can be a lot of conflict that arises, particularly when they're in the process of mourning and trying to make these kinds of decisions of things that hold dear memories in them. It gives them a chance to say what they're feeling, and for you to evaluate that feeling as well. Other people say, I don't have anything of value. Wrong, 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 wrong. Okay? It may not have monetary value. It has emotional value. And you and they should respect that there is emotional value tied to items, and to treat that, appropriately and respectfully. One reason that people give for not bringing this up is, oh, the rest of the family is going to think I'm greedy. It's not a matter of greed. It's a matter of addressing an item that has meaning to them. All right. I don't think that that's a greedy idea when you look at it from the point of monetary value. It's simply an item that holds memories, and that's what the important part of it is. that's also a great time to say, I don't think decisions would be made now. I think that's a great idea. I think I have to consider it. Don't be afraid to interject yourself into that. Somebody says, I'd really like this clock. I've always, loved this clock. They said, okay, I don't have to make the decision right now, but I'll consider it. Or I think that's a great idea. I'll make sure to make a note of it in my will. And do keep notes of where things are going to go. They can easily be incorporated in your will, or it can be separate on a piece of paper that you can just simply handwrite. I want to make sure these items go to such and such person. But what is clear here is that you're making the decision. They've had their input. You're making the decision because these are still your items and they're yours to distribute. If you have an in-law, a daughter-in-law, son-in-law who is close, they may be very hesitant to express a desire for something because they think it's not my place. They're still members of the family. In situations they've been in the family for 40 years or more, and they are affected by the decisions you make about the personal property, and they may have something in particular that they want to remember you by. So I try to make sure that people stop and think and consider, is there anything my daughter-in-law or son-in-law, might want? Just as a personal memento. We're not talking, monetary value, it's emotional value here. A lot of people don't say anything about these items because they think, well, no one's going to listen to me anyway. If you don't speak up, if they don't speak up, you won't know. And that may take a little bit of time teasing out of people. The other similar one is like, I'm too young to worry about death. We all know that's not true. You don't choose when you die. And, things may happen. And these items should, that carry the emotional memory should be dealt with. A lot of people are overwhelmed with the idea. That's a time to introduce the idea of maybe dividing things up, stepping back a little bit, waiting, a little bit, and then later opening the discussion again. A lot of families also don't discuss feelings. It may be very, very uncomfortable for all of the family members, okay? But if you just don't discuss it, you're working on nothing but assumptions, and that may lead to hard feelings because of misunderstandings. It can lead to conflicts because of misunderstandings. And that can be a much bigger problem for the family as a whole down the road. One hopes that people will be able to have, Thanksgiving dinners in future years without remembering that they didn't get such and such mixing bowl. So, part of this is deciding what fair is for you. Is the process fair? It has to be fair for those who are giving the items. It has to be fair for those who are receiving the items. The second thing to consider is, how are you going to resolve conflicts? For people who are in the family that may have the discussion with somebody who's older, finding ways to say how to express what they need. How do I say that? How do I say I'd really like this particular item? It may be something with some value. If a daughter-in-law has always admired a particular gold bracelet or something, that does have monetary value. If there is a daughter in the family, does she want it? You know, how will you settle that conflict? Probably the best way is to discuss it with both of them, maybe not together or maybe together, to let them know what is coming and what your decision is. For the person who is giving these, you should prioritize your goals. Do you want harmony in the family? Are you willing to sacrifice a little bit to get that? Are there some items that should simply not go to anyone because there are too many people who've placed it number one on their priority list? And something that should really never happen in making these decisions and listening to people is laying blame. Particularly, you've heard all the stories, you know, two daughters say, well, mom always liked you best. That's why you're getting XYZ, whatever it may be. You know, don't do that to each other. Don't let them do that to each other. You know, I've talked about Grandma's Yellow Pie Plate, the book. Best $12 I've ever seen invested. But there are other methods as well. You can have one person make the decision. Will that one person be able to go to Thanksgiving dinners after that? Maybe not. But it does serve as a fair process to have one person attempt to be impartial about this. The other program that I had talked about is called Fair Split, FAIRSPLIT.com. They have a really small fee for most of their services. Some of them will allow you to use it on a restricted basis for free. And so everybody decides, you know, what's important to them is, and the nice thing about that is it's very minimal conflict as far as that's concerned. They can also, you know, handle large numbers of items. Something like if you have, you know, a big collection of, you know, gnomes, for all I know, you know, that should be split up among people so that everybody gets a little memory. I always use this example. My mother had a set of green bowls with little clear feet on them. She got them in the 50s when she went to get gas for the car from Esso. And the darn things are collectible now. But there were 5 originals of these. And when my mother passed away, I made sure to mark on the bottom with a little initials which ones were the originals. And then I went and bought more so that each family had a set of at least 4. But they each had one original. But all of them served as the memory of when my, you know, mother used to cook, and she made her special little puddings that went in these special little glasses. And that kind of carries on a family tradition. So, you know, there are ways to kind of work with what is there and still build on these family traditions. So what's really important here when you are the personal representative of an estate who is responsible for distributing and possibly dividing up these items? 1, make an inventory, okay? List everything. It's probably easier to just take a picture of it as well, so there's no confusion between a diamond ring with a 2-carat diamond and a diamond ring with a 1/4 carat diamond, okay? Don't just say diamond ring. Have these pictures. I will often attach these pictures to wills, so there's no dispute about exactly what item we're talking about. Once people see everything, you can kind of get an idea of who wants what. So you need to divide all these items into 3 groups. 1, no one wants them. Nobody wants to touch them. Nobody wants them at all. If they're in good shape, those kinds of items can be donated to charity. Okay. Then there are items that only one person is interested in. That's, a gimme. That's easy. We know who that's going to. And then you've got the items with two or more people who are interested in them. And it's up to the personal representative, if there's nothing in the will, to decide how they're going to be distributed. As far as the first group of items, those are the items you often see going in yard sales. Just to give you an idea of the type of item we're talking about. Then you can, distribute the items that only one person wants, and that's easy enough. And then, deciding how to divide them. It's going to what's left where two or more people want the same item. Usually it's like a bidding system. So I've seen people use poker chips and say, well, do you want this item? How many poker chips are you willing to pay, to get that item? And people make bids on them. Also keep in consideration that, there may be one person in the family who is not receiving anything because they really haven't spoken up. The personal representative should sort of be aware of that is happening, and make a point of making sure that something goes to that person. Again, just reminders about things. Family photos can be duplicated. Sets can be split up like my little green pudding glasses. And groups of items can be divided up so that each family gets, like Christmas ornaments or linens or tableware or china. They can be split up so everybody gets a little bit of it. And when it comes down to that, two individuals can swap out items with each other. One thing that I have to put a little note in here as far as the Register of Wills is concerned. It is now the law in Maryland that when someone passes away, their personal items must be appraised professionally. There are ways to get around it when there are items really truly don't have any value. If all that's left is clothing that no one's really going to want, you can petition the court to accept, a value of $50 or something like that. But everything else should be appraised. There are tons of appraisers out there. They do this for a relatively reasonable fee. You can figure it's going to cost about $350 to have someone go through your house, identify every item, and assign a value to it. Okay. But it needs to be done, and it needs to be reported to the Register of Will. Okay. So don't give away, throw away, donate, disperse items until after they've been appraised. It's a lot harder to get everything back together, to get an appraiser there to look at things. If you're one of the individuals fortunate enough to have to pay federal estate taxes, which means you've got more than $12.9 million in your estate, you do have to get everything appraised. Even if everything you own, is less than $500, because it has to be reported as part of your estate. And there is a tax on it of 40%. That becomes another issue. But for most people, it's got to be appraised. It's got to be reported to the Register of Wills, and, do that appraising before everything goes to the four corners of the earth, just to make, the personal representative's life easier. Does anyone have any questions about what I've been talking about? You can unmute yourselves. Be glad to take questions. Now, again,